It started with her laugh. It always did. The kind of laugh that wasn't just a sound but an embrace, a melody that twined around your chest and squeezed like it had a secret. That laugh was Alyssa in a nutshell, bold, infectious, and utterly magnetic. From the moment I met her, I'd been pulled into her orbit, caught somewhere between admiration and longing. But tonight, her laugh wasn't for me. We were at her friend Sabrina's party, the kind of place where the lights hung low and the air buzzed with chatter, where everyone looked effortlessly cool in a way that made me feel like I'd missed some crucial memo. Alyssa was standing near the kitchen, her head tilted back, exposing the delicate line of her neck, laughing at something the guy across from her had said. He was too close. I sipped my beer, leaning against the far wall, my eyes glued to them. The guy, tall, good-looking in a generic way, was leaning in, his shoulder brushing hers as he gestured animatedly. She was leaning back, her lips parted in that teasing smile I knew all too well. The one that made you think you were the center of her universe, even if only for a moment. And damn it, I hated how good she was at that. Earth to Daniel, someone said, nudging me out of my trance. It was my friend Nathan, holding a glass of whiskey and smirking knowingly. You're staring. Again. I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but Nathan wasn't buying it. He followed my gaze, his smirk widening. Oh, come on, man, he said, his tone half amused, half exasperated. You've been with Alyssa for, what, 2 years? You should know by now she's a flirt. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean I have to like it, I muttered. Nathan laughed, clapping me on the shoulder. Relax. She's crazy about you. Everyone knows it. Including that guy. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Alyssa wasn't just crazy about me. She was crazy about life, about people, about the attention she could pull from a room with nothing but a well-placed smile or a flick of her hair. I'd loved that about her once. Still did if I was honest. But sometimes, it felt like I was just one more person caught in her gravitational pull. I was still watching when she caught my eye. Her smile shifted, softening, and for a moment, it was just the two of us in the crowded room. She gave me that look, the one that said, "You're mine," before turning back to her conversation, leaving me half satisfied and half annoyed. Nathan raised an eyebrow. See? She's got you wrapped around her finger. I sighed, draining the rest of my beer. Yeah, well, maybe it's time I did some unwrapping. The ride home was quiet, the air between us thick with unspoken tension. Alyssa was scrolling through her phone, her expression unreadable. I gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly, my jaw clenched as I replayed the night in my head. You're quiet, she said eventually, her voice light but probing. Just tired, I lied. She glanced at me, her eyes sharp and searching. Alyssa could read me like a book, and I knew she wasn't buying it. Is this about Matt? She asked, and I could hear the amusement creeping into her tone. The guy from the party? I didn't answer, which was answer enough. Daniel, she said, drawing out my name like it was a joke we were both in on. Are you seriously jealous? Again? I tightened my grip on the wheel, refusing to look at her. Come on, she said, leaning over to touch my arm. Her fingers were warm, soft, and maddeningly distracting. You know I only have eyes for you. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, I said before I could stop myself. Her hands stilled, and for a moment, the air between us crackled with something electric. Then she laughed, that low, throaty laugh that both thrilled and infuriated me. Daniel, she said, shaking her head. You're adorable, you know that? But you really don't have anything to worry about. I glanced at her, my jaw still tight. It's not about worrying. It's about respect. She frowned, her amusement fading. Respect? Seriously? You think I'm disrespecting you because I talked to some guy? It's not just that, I said, pulling into our driveway and cutting the engine. It's the way you talk to them. The way you flirt. I'm not flirting, she said, her voice rising. I'm being friendly. There's a difference. Not to them, there isn't, I shot back. She sighed, throwing her hands up. This is ridiculous. Maybe it is, I said, turning to face her fully. But it's how I feel. She stared at me, her eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought she might actually take me seriously. But then she smiled, shaking her head again. You're jealous because you care, she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. And I love that about you. Her words should have soothed me, but instead, they felt like a brush-off. Like she wasn't taking me, or my feelings, seriously. That night, as she curled up beside me in bed, her breathing slow and steady, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between us, like a thread being pulled too tight. Alyssa had always been a fire, burning bright and impossible to contain. I'd fallen for her because of that fire, but lately, it felt like I was getting burned. The next morning, she was back to her usual self, teasing me over coffee and stealing kisses as I tried to get ready for work. She had a way of making everything feel normal, like the cracks in our relationship were just shadows, easily dismissed. But I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. That she loved my jealousy. Like it was some kind of game, a way to keep things exciting. The next few weeks passed in a blur of late-night arguments and make-up kisses, of stolen moments that felt both too much and not enough. Alyssa was still Alyssa, flirty, confident, and maddeningly oblivious to the effect she had on people. And I was still me, caught somewhere between loving her and resenting her. But then one night, everything changed. We were out at a bar with friends, and Alyssa was in rare form, laughing and flirting and commanding the room like she owned it. I watched her from across the table, my jealousy simmering just beneath the surface. But this time, I didn't say anything. When some guy leaned in a little too close, I didn't bristle. When she laughed at his jokes, I didn't scowl. I just sat back, letting her be her, letting the fire burn without trying to control it. By the time we got home, she was buzzing with energy, talking a mile a minute about how much fun she'd had. But when she looked at me, something in her expression shifted. You okay? She asked, her voice softening. Yeah, I said, shrugging. Why wouldn't I be? She frowned, her eyes narrowing. You didn't say much tonight? Didn't have much to say, I said simply. Her frown deepened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Are you mad at me? She asked, her voice quieter now. No, I said, meeting her gaze. Not mad. Just tired of feeling like I have to compete for your attention. She blinked, taken aback. Compete? Daniel, you don't have to. I know, I said, cutting her off. But that's how it feels sometimes. And I can't keep doing this. So if you want to flirt, fine. But don't expect me to play along. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time since I'd met her, Alyssa looked uncertain. Vulnerable. I thought you liked it, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The jealousy. I thought it meant you cared. I do care, I said, stepping closer. But love isn't supposed to feel like a competition, Alyssa. It's supposed to feel like home. Her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But then she stepped closer, wrapping her arms around my neck and pulling me into a kiss that tasted like desperation and apology. I'm sorry, she whispered against my lips. And for the first time, I believed her. The days following our conversation felt like standing on the edge of something I couldn't name. Alyssa was quieter than usual, her usual radiance dimmed. It wasn't that she stopped laughing or teasing entirely. Alyssa was too much herself to change overnight, but there was a deliberateness in the way she behaved around me. She still went out with friends, still lit up rooms, but now her eyes lingered on me longer, as if she was checking to see if I was watching. I wasn't. At least, not the way I used to. I was tired of always being the one trying to catch her attention, so I let her be. And that was when I saw it, something I never thought I'd witness in Alyssa. A crack in her armor. It started one Friday evening. I'd been working late and came home to find her sitting on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, a glass of wine balanced in her hand. She was staring at the muted television, the glow of it painting her face in soft blues and whites. "Hey," I said, shrugging off my jacket. She looked up, her smile automatic but strained. "Hey, how was work?" "Long," I replied, heading into the kitchen to grab a beer. "What about you? What did you do today?" She hesitated, and when I turned back to face her, she was studying me in that way she did when she was trying to figure out what I was thinking. "Not much. Just hung out with Sabrina for a bit." "Sounds nice." "Yeah." Her voice was softer than usual, missing the usual spark, and when I sat down beside her, she leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. It was such a small thing, but it caught me off guard. Alyssa wasn't big on quiet moments. She thrived on chaos, on motion. "You okay?" I asked, tilting my head to look at her. "Yeah," she said, though her voice wavered. "I've just been thinking." "About what?" She bit her lip, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in months. "About us." I tensed, unsure where this was going. "What about us?" She pulled back slightly, turning to face me. Her dark eyes searched mine, and for the first time, I saw something that looked a lot like fear. "You've been different," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ever since that night. At the bar." I didn't answer right away, choosing my words carefully. "I told you, Alyssa, I can't keep doing this. The jealousy, the games, it's exhausting. I love you, but I need to feel like we're on the same team." "I know," she said quickly. "I get that. And I'm trying, I really am." "But," she trailed off, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "But what?" I prompted. She let out a shaky breath. "You're pulling away from me. And I'm scared." Her confession hit me like a punch to the chest. Alyssa, who was always so confident, so self-assured, was scared of losing me. "Alyssa, I know I've screwed up," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I can be too much. And I know I've taken you for granted. But I love you, Daniel. More than anything. And the thought of losing you," she broke off, swiping at her eyes. I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers. "Hey, you're not losing me. I'm still here. But it doesn't feel like you are," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It feels like you're slipping away, and I don't know how to stop it." Her words hung in the air between us, raw and heavy. For the first time, I saw the other side of the coin. Alyssa wasn't just the fire I couldn't control. She was the woman who had let me into her world, who had trusted me to love her for all her flaws and strengths. And maybe I hadn't done as good a job of that as I thought. "I don't want to lose you either," I said finally. "But we can't keep going the way we have. Something has to change." She nodded, her grip on my hand tightening. "I know. And I want to change. For us." Her vulnerability undid me. I leaned in, pressing my forehead to hers. "I love you, Alyssa. Always have." But love has to be more than passion and chemistry. It has to be trust, too. I need to trust that I'm enough for you. You are, she whispered, her voice trembling. You're everything. In the weeks that followed, we worked on rebuilding. It wasn't easy. Alyssa had a way of lighting up rooms, and old habits were hard to break. But she made an effort, and so did I. One night we decided to stay in, just the two of us. She cooked dinner, pasta with way too much garlic, and we sat on the floor of the living room, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about everything and nothing. Remember our first date? She asked, her eyes sparkling in the candlelight. Of course, I said, smiling. You showed up 20 minutes late because you couldn't decide what to wear. She laughed, a genuine laugh that made my chest ache with love. And you looked so annoyed when I walked in. I thought you were going to leave. I almost did, I admitted. But then you smiled at me and I was done for. Her laughter softened, and she reached out to cup my cheek. I didn't think I could fall any harder for you than I did that night. But I do. Every day. Her words hung in the air, and I felt something shift between us. A quiet understanding, a promise unspoken but deeply felt. I don't think I've ever told you this, I said, my voice low. But you terrify me. She raised an eyebrow. Terrify you? I nodded. Because you're so alive, Alyssa. So full of fire. And I'm scared that one day, I won't be enough to keep up with you. Her expression softened and she leaned in, her lips brushing mine in a kiss that was slow and deep, filled with all the things we hadn't said. You are my fire, Daniel, she whispered against my lips. Don't ever forget that. That night, as we lay tangled together, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Alyssa wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But together, we were something worth fighting for. And as her fingers traced lazy patterns on my chest, I knew one thing for certain. Love wasn't about winning or losing. It was about showing up, day after day, even when it was hard. And for her, I'd show up, boys.